All right, this will be our final video for today. We just want to talk through the next few benchmarks. We're not going to be playing anything. We're just going to be kind of giving you a heads up on what to look out for. Because frankly, if you're moving this far already on your own, then you're probably going to be ready to start moving just with a little bit of instruction from us. Depending on how long we're on break, we might come back and do these next few lines and benchmarks in more detail. But for now, we're just going to kind of walk you through the next bunch of concepts in the book. So we're on page 27 in your book, looking at 4.9, which is where we learn about ties. We've talked about ties in some of our band music before, but let's review that this is band math. When you have two of the same notes, same letter, that are connected by one of those curvy lines, it's actually not a slur, it's a tie. If you have an F and an F and they're connected by that curvy line, it's like a plus sign. So a quarter note tied to a quarter note is the same as writing a half note. So two quarter notes tied together would be like playing a half note. So in 4.9, you see there are several pairs of quarter notes that are connected by those curvy lines. Since they're the same letter, the same note name, those are ties. Look at measure 4 of 4.9. There you have a half note tied to a quarter note, which would then be worth 3 beats because 2 plus 1, boom, 3. Magic. Yeah. You're impressed? Yes. She's impressed. That one gets her every time.
Blows me away.
So that half note tied to a quarter note is the same as like playing a half note dot. Be on the lookout for that.
So when you do a tie on your instrument, you're not going to tongue both notes. You're just going to tongue the first one, just like we did with the slurs. Those notes that were all connected together, we only tongued the first one. Same thing happens with the tie. You tongue one time at the beginning of the tie, and then you simply hold that note out for the second part.
So at the beginning of 4.9, your first measure only has 2 notes in it. There's 3 that are written, but the second note and the third note are tied together. So that's really just like one of the same note.
They could have also written that first measure like 2 half notes, and it would sound exactly the same.
Why do you think they would have written it like this?
To get us reading a little differently for the future.
That's right. And because sometimes, what happens if the composer wants a note that's 7 counts long?
And you're in 4/4 time.
You can't fit a 7 count note in a measure of 4/4 time. So then you would need a tie. You would have to tie, well, what would you tie, Miss Kelly, to make 7 counts?
I would tie a whole note and a half note with a dot.
Or you can tie a whole note to a half note and then tie it to another quarter note. You can have 2 ties that can create 1 long note.
I think you guys probably remember in Panther Rising, I think it is, where there's a whole note tied to a half note for
That's
a
right.
6-beat tie.
That's right.
It's the same thing as this.
That's exactly right. So as we move along in the book, 4.10 is again about ties. There are no slurs in 4.10. All of those curvy lines, since they're connecting the same letter note, those are just ties. So make sure you're counting those carefully. When you're clapping it, you don't say quarter, quarter when those 2 notes are tied together. You're going to say quarter tie. You're going to slide through it like a half note. Quarter tie. Or half note tie is very similar to half note dot. Half note tie to get all 3 of those beats.
When you look at this piece, it doesn't look like there's any of the measures that are the same, that might sound the same. But if you think about it, in 4.10, you have quarter, quarter, half note. In the second measure, you have quarter, quarter, quarter tie, which is the exact same thing. So sometimes they're putting the same rhythm back to back, but they're using the tie way to write it. So it's a different way of reading the notes.
Yep. When you're playing, percussionists, when you're playing on bells, you have to make sure that you continue to count all the way through those tied notes. You can't start early on your next played note. You still have to be thinking quarter tie or half note tie to make sure you're playing the right length note.
In percussion, you guys also have a bunch of rolls in these 2 exercises that we've talked about already. And Mrs. Carnahan took you out of class that one day to talk about rolls and gave you a worksheet that has some rolls and some guidance with that on it. So you can use that worksheet to kind of figure some of these out too if you're this far in the book.
Yep. And a lot of those are 16th note rolls. So think tippy tippy or pepperoni. And if it has the slashes or the Z, you're going to get multiple bounces in there. pepperoni, pepperoni, to make sure you're getting those rolls correct. Let's move on to 4.11. We're on page 28 now.
And this one is in 3/4 time. And if you look closely, you'll see that we have a combination of ties and slurs. Can you identify how many slurs we have in this piece?
Count them now. How many slurs are there?
I'm seeing that there are 3 slurs. I see 3 places where notes are connected that are different. And then I see 2 places where we have ties. Half notes tied together that are the same letter name. So 3 slurs and 2 ties in this piece.
Those ties are half note to half note, half note, half note. Add them together, they're 4 counts. But I don't want you to think of counting them as 1, 2, 3, 4, because we're in 3/4 time. You're not going to be counting to 4 when there's only 3 beats in the measure. So instead, when you get to the half note, just think half note, half note. Or if you're counting the beats in the measure, those always start on count 2, because it's quarter and then the half note. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 to get that tie.
That's a perfect
2, 3,
example.
1, 2.
That's a perfect example of, they could have used a whole note there. We know whole notes get 4 beats, but they couldn't because it's in 3/4 time and I'm not allowed to use whole notes there.
Definitely recommend that you listen to the CD or the sound files that come with the book to get an idea of that one, and clap along with it. That way you're practicing the difference between slurs and ties. When you practice clapping, you do clap slurs.
Yes.
You do clap slurs.
Because your notes are changing.
You don't clap the second note of the tie. I think that makes sense, right?
I think it does.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's move on. 4.12 is going to introduce a new note. Well, for some of you, it's a new note. Some of you already had this note in Panther Rising. Brasses, this is our wolf pack fingering for D flat or E flat. Horns, you have the A flat up there, but for all of you, it's going to be second and third valve. Trombone, this is going to be 5th position for you, so find 4th, go a little bit further, there's 5th.
And then flutes, we have D flat. So we're just going to use our pinky just to balance our flute. So my flute will balance between my pinky finger and my chin. I'll have to push really hard up here so that my flute doesn't fall out of my hands. Clarinets, you guys have an E flat where we're going to use a side key. So on your top hand, you're fingering a D, and on the bottom hand, there are 4 side keys on the right of your clarinet. And you're going to use the very bottom one with the side of your pointer finger for E flat.
I always think about just bumping it, just kind of turning my hand and bumping that bottom side key.
Then oboes, you guys have D flat also. I've showed you that in a lesson before with that middle pinky key on the bottom. Alto saxophones, you're going to get to use that side key as well. You're fingering A, and then you have your side key on the bottom. You have those side keys on your right hand. You're going to use the one that's underneath.
I'm pretty sure they had that in Panther Rising.
I think
so
they
you
did
already know
too.
this one.
And then tenor saxes, high E flat. So you guys have your D fingering with the octave key, and you're going to use your top pinky key. At the bottom of your saxophone, you have 2 pinky keys, an upper and a lower, and it's going to be the upper pinky key for E flat.
I'm pretty sure they had that note also.
I think they did too,
I think they'll be
actually.
in good shape for that
Yeah.
one. So 4.12 uses that new note. Make sure you're on the lookout for that. Maybe you want to circle it. Brasses, you might want to write the number 23 underneath that note. If you use your second and third valve, or trombones, you can write the number 5 under there as a reminder.
You're going to see that when you have that note, it's got a flat next to it. That's how you're going to identify that.
4.13 is going to take that new note that you just learned and plug it right into a key signature. So now you're going to have flats at the beginning of your key signature. Flute, oboe, trombone, baritone, tuba, bells. Now your key signature has 4 flats, B, E, A, D. And that spells the word bead. That's a nice easy way to remember what those flats are. Trumpet, clarinet, and tenor saxophone now have 2 flats, B flat and E flat. The alto saxophones are going to have just B flat in their key signature, and the French horns have 3 flats, B flat, E flat, and A flat.
You might want to go through and jot some of those flats in just to get yourself thinking that way before you try to play this.
She means put a little flat sign in front of the note in the music.
And then remember too that when you have those flats in your key signature, it applies to low and high notes.
No matter what the register is.
So if I have A flat and I'm a trombone player, it could be low A flat or high A flat. A lot of instruments we've learned a low and a high version. So if it's supposed to be flatted, you have to play it flatted in all of your registers.
That's correct. In 4.13, there's a repeat sign there. When you take that repeat, you only go to that backwards repeat sign, just as a reminder. That pickup note at the very, very, very beginning, you don't play that the second time through. That's already covered in the last measure that's written there. 4.14 is the next benchmark. And this is a good one to practice in chunks. So this one uses the new key signature of flats. It has first and second ending. There are no slurs. There are no ties, so you don't have to worry about any of that. This one is just tonguing all the notes and making sure you're playing those new notes in the key signature.
And there's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. So what you want to do is go through and find all of your flats, all of them, right off the bat. Maybe you're going to circle them. Maybe you'll write in a reminder fingering, but eventually get to the point where you're starting to erase some of those markings so that you're reading the notes and not just reading the fingerings that you put in on the bottom.
The map for this piece is also a little bit confusing because of the repeat signs. So just like in the last exercise, when we repeat, we don't repeat all the way back to the beginning. We only repeat back to the first repeat sign. So I'm not going to repeat those pickup notes at the very beginning when I go back.
Definitely want to break this into chunks of about 6 or 7 notes. That's all you should practice in this one, is 6 or 7 notes at a time. Or you can think of it from the beginning to the breath mark. Or you can even split that in half, the beginning to just the beginning of the second measure, or from there to the next breath mark, or just the second ending. Actually, the second ending's got a lot of notes. You might want to take that one measure at a time in the second ending. But this is a fun one to play.
It is.
It's a good John Philip Sousa march. Fun to play with the recording, so definitely play along with your CD at home. It's like playing with a full marching band right there with you. All right, I think that's good for right now.
If you have any questions or you get past that point and you're not sure how to move forward, you can always email us and we'd be happy to guide you.
Absolutely, and a reminder that you can also send videos of yourselves playing benchmarks to your primary lessons teacher, or if you just have a question like, hey, am I doing this slur right, or am I playing this new note correctly, shoot us a video. That's totally cool, that's fine. Feel free to add comments and whatnot below the video, and we hope you're doing well, we hope you're staying healthy, and we can't wait to see you again. Hope you're practicing. Bye.